Good morning. I want to talk about child care and inner child work for own healing, so that way other children don't have to heal from as much stuff when they're older. I think that's what we're going to talk about here. And something came to me yesterday that I want to talk about. So, when we're younger, I'm sure most of us have been asked the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Now, I personally have been going through and looking into the concept of inner work and essentially just self-development, but with the lingo because it's fun to be a part of it. And so one of the things that the person that I predominantly listen to says is, instead of focusing on what you want to be or what you want or what's going to be that new change for you, instead focus on who has all the what's and then become that person. Do you understand? And I thought that was super, super fascinating. I love that. And so that's something I've started to implement, and it requires you to firstly know what you want. So a lot of us we're not crystal, definitively, objectively clear. We couldn't write it out. We couldn't actually daydream about it, like conceptually, watch like a movie. If you couldn't watch like the comic strip of your desire, you probably don't fully know what it is that you want. So it forces you to firstly know what you want. And then when you go into the who has all of those things, it's like, you know how there's working from top down and then working from bottom up? Like top down working, from the way I think about it, is like starting at the end of the maze and then finding your way back to the beginning. And then working from the bottom up is starting at the beginning of the maze and working your way back. And for y'all who've done mazes, sometimes starting at the end and working your way back really is more helpful. Not always, and not for everyone. So you gotta know where to work with yourself with and on. But that's my understanding and how I will probably be using the phrase working top down. The way I see it, this mindset of knowing the who is working from top down. But if you're not used to working from top down, let's say maybe you can't see the end of the maze, you can't necessarily go backwards. But if the stuff that you know, the what you want, if you know that stuff, you can almost like draw the end of the maze, almost guess where the end of the maze is going to be, have an idea of where the end of the maze is going to be, and then work back from there. Because working back from there, working top down, really can be extremely, extremely helpful, because you just have more. It's like you're sure of more. There's more definitive stuff to work with. And then you're more confident as you work your way down. So even if you're making more mistakes, or you find out that maybe that wasn't technically accurate, you're more likely to have gone further in the same amount of time that it would have taken you to work from the bottom up. And so you have more information to figure out how to do it better next time, whether you decide to go top down, bottom up, sideways, however it is you want to do it. So once you get all the what you want and you know what they are, then you move almost into a different stage where you're crafting this person, this ideal, this goal, this person that you technically want to be, who you want to be when you grow up. And now you know. And when you create this person, they're not just a collection of all the what's, or maybe they are, depending on, I guess, what kind of what's you have. If your what's are from lots of different perspectives and aspects in your life. So, like, what kind of member of a family unit do you want to be? Whether you're someone's sister, someone's father, someone's uncle, someone's cousin, someone's grandchild, like that sort of stuff. And aspects of family, whether your friends are going to count as your family, if you want to have like those kinds of friendships where it's like all, whether you want it all to be interconnected or whether you want to compartmentalize and they know like about each other but they're not necessarily having to be connected to, that can be a whole elaborate what in and of itself, or a bunch of little whats put together or not put together depending on how you're doing it. But then there's also in the aspect of like career, business, making money, passion, purpose, what you're doing, what else you're doing with your life that's aside from just relational. And then there's emotional, physical, like personal development as a human being, because hopefully you're growing. Hopefully you're growing. No one should be staying the same for as long as they're going to be alive, because hopefully we're all living for a decent amount of time. And anything more than like a decade, in my opinion, you should not be the same. 10-year-olds and infants are not the same. And that's the kind of growth that I think is reasonable over a decade for kind of all of the decades. Like maybe not in the same way, but definitely that amount in whatever aspect or category you're going to have it in. But yeah, in another category, maybe your intelligence, your knowledge, how much you know about the world, how much you've experienced, whether that's reading, whether that's building and creating, whether that's just trying out like hobbies and just getting new experiences, whether that's writing books, whether that's taking courses, going to college, taking and earning certificates, whatever it is. But those are all very different like streams, like different avenues of life. So all of those whats, all of those, like that many from that many different spaces of what's coming together to craft a person, I think that's realistic. That can craft an ideal person. And then you'll have your natural, like your inner personality anyway. That's likely not going to go anywhere. Like it's going to shift, it's going to grow. But like the most natural and supernatural version of yourself, that part's in there. It's going to go with you when you reach this ideal version. If someone else had the exact same kind of what's as you, they'd still be bringing their innermost like supernatural version of them to it, so it probably wouldn't look exactly the same anyway. So that's almost freeing to know when you have the what's and you create this who, you become the who and the who becomes you. You like integrate to a certain extent. No one really has to like totally die for the other to exist. You're gonna exist together at the same time. So yeah, I think that's a very, at least for me, a very psychologically soothing truth to hold and to recognize that you can get there and not have to die or kill anyone off, because that's like the ultimate fear in the human brain anyway, because we're animals on the planet, we gotta survive, and that's like our most deep underlying fear. Like if you follow your fears far enough back, eventually, even if it's not logical, if you don't try to logic it, even if you work all the way back to like the deepest, most earliest, most primal fear, it's fear of death. So yeah. And so once you have that who, once you know who you want to be, then going for that top, because you've already technically worked from the bottom up to get to that top. The top is the who, the what's, we're the bottom. So you worked up and you know what the top looks like. Gunning for the top and altering your life for the top can be done through the avenue of the what's. So it is technically working bottom up, I guess, but psychologically it's not. So you don't get as caught up in the what's and the bottom that you're starting with. So it's technically the same. It's technically not different, but in the ways that matter, which is what your brain thinks when you do it, it is different. And that's all that really matters, because that's how you get what you want. And yeah, I feel like that's redundant at that point. It's how you get what you want, and you want to get what you want because you want it. So yeah, then you can almost use the what's to get to the who. And I feel like nowadays, there's a lot of like the concept of like manifesting from the perspective of changing your mind first, which, you know, if it worked for people, that's none of my business. I don't think I know enough to have a real true opinion on other people's stuff, because I feel like uneducated opinions aren't valuable. But just sharing my thoughts and my conclusion on it, and for me personally, trying to change the mindset first before anything else is not fruitful, because it feels like you're lying, which, I mean, you kind of are, but it feels like it, and it feels like you're not like a fraud, but almost like this is like almost like this isn't fruitful. This is a waste. Nothing is gonna come from me, like affirmations and stuff like that, when it's on its own. And something that I've been thinking about, but that someone else really put into words for me, is that, especially if you're stubborn, you gotta do the thing before you worry about the mindset matching up. It's like doing something scared, and then eventually it doesn't scare you anymore because you didn't die. And then your brain's like, oh, okay, we didn't die. It may not be like extremely pleasant, but if it's gonna be beneficial, it's viable, and it's fine, and you can psychologically reframe how you interact with and deal with this thing, you know? As opposed to like trying to get yourself to just not be scared of it first, but not making any steps. That's like, what's the term? Analysis paralysis. And that's something that I personally have really had to work on. But at first, I was trying to work on it from the perspective of just don't be scared. Just don't be nervous. Just don't be anxious. I was trying to logic it. Like, there's no reason to be afraid. I know I'm not going to die. Technically. But it wasn't until I started taking the phrase of, like, the concept of knowing that I'm not going to die and using that to force myself to do it anyway. I wasn't trying, like, I stopped trying to coax myself. I'm too stubborn to be coaxed. Personally, I've learned this about myself. It doesn't usually work for myself, from other people. I cannot really be coaxed into things that I've decided that just, I'm not, no. Probably no. So trying to do it to myself was also not working. Working with myself that way, it doesn't work. And I finally stopped and I looked at it and I was like, if this doesn't work, trying to still do it is not fruitful. It's pointless. And so then the idea came to me. I was actually in a Bible study and this concept was really kind of solidified. Like, you do it if it's something you know is valuable and like matches up with your values. That's the concept of valuable for each person. It's your own personal values, and subconsciously you're already living by them. So if you don't like know what they are, you have to be kind of intentional about figuring that out. Maybe ask people who are close to you that you trust and that love you and that know you, or whatever. Like, that's, I think being aware of that is something valuable to have in your life, because I think the values of self-growth and self-awareness are important. But yeah, your own personal values are how you decide what is valuable. That's why the things we think are valuable are not always things that other people think are valuable, and vice versa. And that's why that is okay in most regards, unless you're like a sick, cannibal, serial murdering person. That's different. But in general, it's okay. It's actually good. That's how we hear and see other perspectives, and we're not all, you don't get so narrow-minded that you like crush your brain and your brain cells turn off and you can't think or engage with other people in a reasonable, frankly humane way. So that's important, that's good. Trying to beat that out of people is not a good thing to do. And so circling back to what we're talking about, knowing what is valuable is also going to be present in your what's for what you want. And all of that real and going through that will get you up to the top without being so focused on achieving the what's, because we're not trying to grab it and then hold on to it super tight and think, I got it, I did it, good job me, and you just sit there and just hold on to it forever. Because when you can't grow like that, like at all, like this is like a scientific thing you can look up with our cells on a cellular level. There are like two switches, two modes of being. One is growth and one is protection. You cannot be in both at the same time, and you always are in one or the other. If you're like this after you've gotten what you wanted, this is not growth. You can't climb a mountain with these hands. You can't pick up a pencil with these hands. You can't open a door with these hands unless it's motion censored. Life is so much harder when you're like this. Even if what's in your hand is something amazing. If you had gold bars in your hands, you still could not open a door. You still could not pick up a pencil. You still couldn't do a lot of things, frankly, because you're not in the growth aspect. You gotta be able to open your hands up. I'm not saying throw stuff on the ground and like don't hold anything. Your hands are still there. They're like mobile and functional in their hands. And they're not made to just grab onto one thing and hold onto it forever and never open their hands ever again. Never open up ever again. From my standpoint, one of the goals is to grow in a way that is beneficial to who we want to be. And so I've said all of this, circling back to the first question, or the first thing, I guess, that I mentioned, which is when children are asked, or when we ask children, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like I said, it's not necessarily a bad question. Okay, this made me think of something else. Okay. It's not in and of itself a bad question. It's just a lower level thinking question. So lower level thinking questions are yes or no questions, questions that have definitive, obvious answers. They have the one correct answer. You either get it or you don't. With higher level thinking, you're in the upper parts of Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy, you can look it up, actually. I think it's very fascinating, personally. But it's kind of like, it's like the cognitive version of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the bottom part of the pyramid is to remember, which is like identifying, name recall, the stuff that, like when children learn their numbers and colors. You just remember the numbers, you just remember the colors. It's the most basic of the basics of basics. You just need to know what it's called. And then there's understand, which is where children go from knowing the numbers in order to understanding the value of the numbers. So this is 1. So it goes from memorizing that this is 1 to knowing that this is also 1 notebook. That this is 1 petal. To knowing that, like, this is 1 chain. Like, the concept of what they have remembered. Like, knowing what it is. Fully understanding it. Being able to count. And being able to count in order is remembering, because you remember the order of the numbers. Understanding it is knowing that this number comes after this number because it is 1 more than the previous number. Knowing that 2 comes after 1 because 1 plus 1 is 2. 3 comes after 2 because 2 plus 1 is 3. That's where the logic starts to come in. Realizing the fullness of a concept. That's understanding. Like describing, discussing. I have my notes down here. That's why I'm looking down. And then above that is applying the knowledge. So essentially application problems. In like word problems. In math. And even in like the reading passage questions, the ones where you can't just go back and find the answer in there. Like the ones that ask about tone or someone's perspective or well, actually no, those are a bit higher. Not necessarily the perspective. But applying is like explaining why or identifying with something. So that's almost more of sharing your opinion. Yeah, that's more of sharing your opinion. So I would say that's even more of just the open answers where they ask, I'm trying to think. Like, what would you do in this situation almost? For language thing. For math, it really is just like a word problem. Like, for example, with the Pythagorean theorem, and they use the ladder, and they throw the ladder over, and they tell you how long certain parts of the thing is, and you got to figure out whatever it is you need to figure out. Maybe how long the hypotenuse is or something. Or what the actual angle is. Maybe it's not exactly 90 degrees, like that kind of thing. Those are application problems. Because you're taking what you understand, you're taking concepts that you fully understand, and you're using them in a way that is technically different than the way you were taught. Most of us were not taught math by going outside and measuring ladders that are leaning on buildings. Therefore, it is application. Above that one is analyzation, which is being able to infer. So that is more of the why do you think they did that? Explaining someone else's perspective. I would say even acknowledge, like being able to recognize tone and being able to talk about the tone and why they think that is the tone. Or analyzing, like getting, like with graphs, being able to take a scatter plot and turn it into some other form, like a line graph, bar graph. Because a scatter plot is literally, you just take all the data, you just put it on there, you just slap it on there. And then that's the scatter. But when you want to create, visually demonstrate the line of best fit or the trend, that requires a higher level of thinking beyond just putting down what it is that was seen, what was created. So that's more so analyzing. And then above that is evaluating, which is more so being able to defend and criticize something, which is actually where opinion should come from a standpoint of. In my personal opinion, which I believe is the correct opinion, it's ironic. If you don't have at least a level 4 learning, like thinking capability for a concept in order, you cannot skip stages. In order, your opinion does not hold any true actual value. Especially not in conversation with people who are up there. So that's my personal opinion. So even when I share certain things, a lot of it is just sharing my thoughts or sharing where I am right then. But a lot of it's not like, oh, this opinion that I have has genuine value and I'm going to like defend the opinion. I might defend a standpoint for the sake of learning and conversation, but there are very few things I feel like in life right now as a pretty young woman where I have like a steadfast opinion. Like steadfast, like I would defend it. I would tell you that you are wrong. Like I don't think I know enough about most things to have that kind of opinion. To have a real opinion. I also don't think that a lot of people have enough of the ability to have higher level thinking on a lot of things that they seem to have opinions about. So I wouldn't want to converse with them anyway, even if I did think I could have a real opinion, because it's very likely that they think they could too, and from my value point, their opinion isn't valuable. So why would I want to discuss it with them? That just sounds extremely unfun, so I don't. So yeah, that's my perspective on opinions. But evaluating is being able to express an opinion based on being able to remember, understand, apply, and analyze a topic or concept. And then the supernatural, like deepest, innermost part of you interacts with those 4 levels and layers of learning, and then an opinion is born or crafted. That is how opinions come to be, my opinion, which I think holds a little bit of value because I've been working on understanding this for quite a while. And it is something to defend or criticize because you have something to defend or criticize. If you're just learning the name of something, you don't get, in my opinion, you don't get to defend or criticize it. If you're just figuring out how to discuss something, you do not get to criticize or defend it. That doesn't make any sense. You're just figuring this out. If you're just learning how to explain why something happened, you do not get to defend or criticize it. And your opinion on it doesn't hold any real value. You just got here. If you are just learning how to infer, just learning how to take what you see, which up to analyzing, no, up to applying, you're just taking what you see and moving it, maybe. With analyzing, you're taking what you see, possibly moving it, and then making actual projected inferences for what could be based on this, and doing it well. It is once you can do it well. If you're just starting to do it, opinion doesn't really hold as much value. You don't know anything. It's like asking someone for advice. It would be like if I asked a peer for advice on something that they're not way ahead of me on, like on relationships. Unless I'm talking to someone who's been married in the US possibly a concerning amount of time, or from another country for a decent amount of time. Why would I do that? What do they know that I don't? Probably not much. Or even like a fully grown adult, like a truly grown adult. They have children, possibly grandchildren. They've been here for a while. They can sustain themselves. I can choose to value their opinion in certain whats. if the product of their parenting is stellar, like stellar, like I want to raise my children that way, I may value and ask their opinion on that. If they have no money, they can sustain themselves, but like, God forbid something happen and something gets thrown out of whack, they're screwed. I'm not going to value their opinion on finances in any real regard, aside from maybe the stuff that they regretted. Because the stuff they regretted is seeming kind of regrettable. So maybe don't do it that way. But like the stuff that they regret, not the stuff that they have a low opinion of. If they're talking trash about rich people, I would not consider that valuable, because what do they know about being rich? They're not. They have no money, and from what I'm explaining, they don't know what to do with it. So why would I want to? What's the point of valuing an opinion from that standpoint? There isn't any from where I'm sitting. So, being able to defend and criticize something with 4 levels of knowledge out of 6 backed up behind it, that is a full evaluation. You're able to take different perspectives, like in speech and debate, where you have to switch sides. In order to do that effectively, you gotta know enough to talk, to hold your own, to hold any weight in the conversation. So that's how I understand evaluation. Knowing enough. And it's almost like that's the first place where you kind of start over, because you cannot, the product of level 5 cannot exist without every product up to 4. At all. No, it can exist. That's even worse. It can exist, but it can be pointless. So in order to keep it pointy, you gotta value all the things that come before. It's like always, like the concept of always learning, never stop learning. Once you get to that higher level thinking, that becomes true. For the ones below, not really. Once you hit level 5, it is. A lot of advice. Oh my gosh, that just hit me. A lot of advice is from people who frankly should be giving advice. And the people who should be giving advice are kind of up there. So they're kind of talking to products more so. Like the tops. The top down versus bottom up. They're speaking from their perspective and they're at the top. You can always work top down if you're not up there yet. But that's what I think. That makes sense to me. And then the 6th one is to create something. To create something is to design it, to write it, to construct it. You can take raw material and create an individual. That's what I'm calling it. Like in the concept of, okay, so so the stars, the galaxy, so space, outer space, the galaxy, the universe. The pictures that we've seen of that look the same as neurons firing in our brain. That's like stuff you can look up. It's super interesting to me. I think it's super cool. But it looks like basically the same. To the untrained eye, and possibly even the trained eye, if it's just a normal camera, unless you've memorized everything, they look the same. The exact same. or how organelles are just organs for a cell, or how all the cells work together to keep the body going. Humans in society working together creates the community in this society. Everything is the same, it's just on different scales. I think that is so cool. Okay, I think it's so cool. Based on that, my understanding of individual is a self-sufficient being. Because organelles cannot survive on their own. Organs cannot survive on their own. To a certain extent, humans cannot survive on their own. Like one singular human, even if somehow that person did live to like the ripest of old ages in a world with no other humans, where there have never been any, living in houses full of predators, dangerous plants, probably no healthcare, no medical stuff, and they somehow made it to ripe old age, they'd be the last one because they couldn't reproduce. So, from where I'm sitting, an individual is, it means different things at different levels. And it is a self-sufficient being. So human is a self-sufficient bundle of cells. A cell is a self-sufficient bundle of organelles. Everybody's working together, doing what they need to do, creating the product for which they were designed to create, and everything is swell. Everything is dandy, everything's great. When humans are all working together and acting like they have sense, society and communities flow well and benefits the humans that are in it. When your body is unhealthy, your cells are suffering. When organelles are not working, the cell doesn't function well. Everything is connected. That's not new information, but it's right. Everything is connected, and that's just the truth. So, when we're creating things, we are creating individuals. Self-sufficient, autonomous beings that thrive in social structures. Cells thrive with other cells. Humans thrive with other humans. Obviously, none of us are exactly the same. Like, organelles are not the same as other organelles, or you wouldn't necessarily, I would assume, need all those organelles. Unless you want to be bigger, then maybe you just multiply the same ones that you had. But it wouldn't be autonomous then. It'd just be a really big, I don't know, mitochondria or something. But that's not a cell. That's an overgrown mitochondria. They're different. Because a cell is an individual. A mitochondria is not on the perspective that we're talking about. Because a mitochondria only has value when it's contributing to a cell. I'm saying that from the human perspective. I'm not that much of a scientist, so if there's something else, tell me about it actually, because that sounds interesting. But in perspective of humans, mitochondria, its purpose is the powerhouse of the cell, like everyone knows. So if there's no cell, the mitochondria's not doing anything. It's probably dead already, actually, because it's relying on the other organelles to keep it going and to give to. The same thing is true for humans. Society cannot function. Human society cannot function without humans. And it cannot function well without healthy humans. And a human, in and of itself, on its own, with no purpose, and the purpose in this case is community, even if it's not just other human community, maybe it's thought community with people who think like you, or being surrounded by being able to surround yourself with nature, if that's a community that you need to be part of, that's still community, and it's still a society. When humans don't have purpose, that's my understanding of depression. And I don't mean that like you feel like you don't have a purpose and so you become clinically depressed. My understanding of it is that clinically depressed people do not feel purpose. That's how it's been described. That's how I've heard it explained. That's my understanding of it. If you've been depressed before, correct me, I guess, if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. That's how that works. People need purpose. People's purpose is community and society, not necessarily just human community and society, but including human community and society. Same with ecosystems. When species go extinct, the whole thing shifts. The ecosystem in and of itself is an individual. When stuff changes in there, the individual changes. It's different. Totally different. It's like strains of bacteria in your gut microbiome. If you lose even one, but like one or two of the really important ones, you can't digest stuff. Not effectively, not in a way, not fruitfully. You can't digest it. Maybe you broke it down, but you didn't get any of the goodness out of it that you need to keep your body sustained and thriving. Because your organ system doesn't have all that it needs. The organ system society that it's got going on in there, it's lacking. And that affects everything. Everything all the way up, starting from the bottom, all the way up. It affects, you can look this up, this affects your mood, your cognitive ability. It affects your emotional stability by a lot, actually. Like, you would be surprised. Your emotional stability by a lot. And then that affects how you show up in society and in communities. And if enough people are like that, it throws off the whole thing. And when the whole thing is thrown off, because especially on Earth, humans have a lot of power, then we screw up all the other stuff. And then we're suffering from that because it's all interconnected. I say all of that to say, when you're creating, you are creating individuals. You are designing, you are constructing, you are building from scratch, essentially. But the scratch is not nothing. The scratch is raw materials, pre-product materials. So it's like creating a person. The way pregnancy works, sperm means egg. Egg is in fertile, healthy, good environment, or enough environment. Sometimes it's not good, but it's enough for it to not die. It's in there, and it's growing. It's becoming. It's being created. Person's being created in there. That's how that works. Without the sperm, the sperm is the raw material. That's what that is. It's necessary. It is not nothing. Like, you can't be replaced with nothing. Like you can't make a baby without sperm, from what I understand. Maybe science people and the government and the secret stuff are already working on that. But as far as I know, there's only one way to make a child. And it requires a sperm, and it requires an egg, and it requires a proper environment. And because sperm doesn't equal 0, they're not interchangeable. Therefore, that's my example to say, building from scratch, because I would consider that building from scratch. You don't have much. but you don't have nothing. You have exactly what is needed to create what will be created. So those raw materials are very incredibly important. You could think of the raw materials as the what's, and the creation as the who. Let me think about it. Does that make sense? Hang on. Yeah, that was actually really good. Yeah, that makes sense. So think of it that way. Yeah, so that's the concept of higher level thinking. Now, in regards to higher level thinking, a lot of the time, from what I've noticed, because I've recently been working in childcare and spending time, with other people's children just in general, is that a lot of people don't engage in higher level thinking, or they do and they're not intentional about making sure that their children are familiar with and engaging in higher level thinking. But higher level thinking is how you get up to creation. You can't get to creation without going through the other 5 in order. Going up and then stopping at like a 2, maybe a 3, possibly a 4 is not enough to have valuable opinions. Valid and valuable are technically different. To have valuable opinions and or to create any true individual. To meet all of the standpoints, for it to be self-sufficient, for it to be autonomous, and for it to thrive in social structures. And for it to be able to go through all the other standpoints, like all the other levels. If you create something and there's no aspect of it to remember, to identify, to name, recall, you don't really have anything yet. It's like not truly knowing what your what's are. It's not horrible, but you can't create anything based off of that. If you can't describe or discuss it, you need more work. You need to put in more of that effort because it's not ready yet. It's not created yet. Or application, where you can explain it, or analyzation, where you can infer and use it to apply it in ways that are not just physical. To apply it in social, relational, psychological, cognitive, all the other ways aside from just ladder on the house. Can you do that with whatever it is you're creating? Can you and other people, because social structures do that. And I'm not saying everyone, because some people are just difficult and they just don't want to understand. That's fine. That's not our business. What are you going to do about that? But for the rest of the world, everyone is not out to get you. Does your concept make sense? Yes or no? If you don't know, mention it around other people and see what they say. And then evaluating. If you have all of the other 4, then you can defend or criticize it. There's enough to do that. You can express an opinion about what it is that you created. Someone else could. It's possible. But if those 4 aren't there, then your creation is not a full creation. It has to be an individual, and from my perspective, it has to be an individual that meets the 4 levels minimum for it to be full, for it to be done, for it to be an individual. Now, children aren't being intentionally taught that. Children grow up to be adults, and they are expected to behave as such. They're given such responsibilities by the nature of the way we live. It's not like just society or the government completely. There's not always someone who's going to be taking care of someone. growing up is how the world is supposed to work. Everything grows. Plants grow, animals grow, people grow. Beyond just physically, hopefully you're like growing in all the aspects. Everything grows. Technology grows over time. Change and growth. Valuable and inescapable. Having an opinion on it doesn't really change anything in that regard. Which we go into why in a whole different bunch of different ways, but still, like for this conversation, we could just stop there. It doesn't matter if you like growing, or it doesn't matter if you like changing. So I feel like growth is maybe a bit different, but change, it's gonna happen. It's gonna come. So people, little people, children, if people are just out here all willy-nilly, no one's guiding them on how to engage or get to higher level thinking, then most people are not going to get there, which is unfortunate. It's great for those few percent who do it on their own. Good for them. They're probably living much better lives. But for those who are not, they are the majority of creating the societies and communities that we're all stuck in. We're all interacting with. Even the elites of the elites are on Earth. We're all connected. Once again, we're all connected. So, frankly, it would behoove all of us to familiarize people, all people, with higher level thinking. Teaching them how to do it, learning how to do it ourselves. It's just incredibly valuable to be able to think, to be able to come to conclusions, to be able to have a standpoint in life, to be able to have a valuable opinion, and to be able to dedicate yourself to something where you know what you're getting into. And I feel like, it's just came to me, I feel like you can't truly have a purpose if you can't think. Like true, like higher level thinking. If all you can do is remember and understand and possibly apply, I feel like you wouldn't know enough to be safe dedicating yourself to something outside of yourself. You can't get beyond survival like that. You're just getting by. You're just not dead, which is great. But I feel like that number 4 analyzation is it's like a fork in the road, and you decide from there which place you're gonna go. And of course, you can be guided to the better fork in the road. What I would consider the better fork in the road, which is the one that leads to being able to evaluate stuff, to being able to step beyond just the lower rankings in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because the top one is self-actualization. I would consider that one and creation on the same level, on the same tier. So if they were side by side, the levels would not be the same size. Physiological needs, from the perspective of this type of pyramid of a higher level thinking Bloom's taxonomy thing, it's way bigger. Like remember, understand, and apply are in physiological needs. And I don't remember the other ones off the top of my head, but you can pull up a picture and figure out which ones you think go in which. I feel like it's something incredibly critical that isn't necessarily being focused on. And I think that is extremely detrimental to life as a human being. So that's higher level thinking. Children are capable of higher level thinking as children. People are capable of it as being a minor, as being like a child minor, not just like a legal minor, like 17 or 18, 19, like 17 in America, or 16. I mean like 8, like 6, like 4. I'm related to some of those people. It's a little bit frustrating when they're little and they're like so smart. It's just like, but that's gonna really help them when they're older. Being able to think expansively. And they're still going up because they're being guided. But children can get to the, like once you hit creation, you don't just stop there. That pyramid is like its own little what. You can have them in all of your different whats. And in the little whats of your what. The pyramid is technically a shape, but you can have more shapes. It's not just the one little pyramid. You slap it on everything. That's how you get to mastery. Creation is mastery. True ordered creation is mastery. That has the other ones inside of the top one. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to explain this correctly, but with creation, all the other levels of the triangle are inside of it. And then inside of that little one, all the little levels of that triangle is inside of it. So it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but it's infinite. Wholly and truly infinite. Like God. Just, oh. That stuff is so interesting. So, children can engage in higher level thinking. If you teach a child to do it, then there is an adult with the foundation of the practice skill of engaging in higher level thinking. They're eons ahead of everyone else. Eons. That child could be you. Because we're all just old children. Also, this is something I learned, and I think it has a place to say here. I don't know if y'all have heard of the science or the concept, or just you have this subconscious knowing that children learn easier than adults. That isn't necessarily true. People learn quicker, better, more effectively when their neurons are firing. You know, neurons that fire together, wire together. When they're firing, something is happening. They're being stimulated. It's a response. They technically fire with things that are familiar, but the brain is energy conserving. It's a very expensive organ, so it's gotta be, because otherwise it would just be incredibly kind of wasteful in regards to stuff that is routine, for it to always be starting over and being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, because no, it's not. And don't waste your energy. People think and they learn beyond just thinking. They can learn, and you learn easier and better when you can think better. Just in general, I've seen the difference between the two very stark. People learn better the more their neurons fire off on a regular basis. Since the brain's neurons, the neurons in your brain, fire off more when you're engaging in something new, something unfamiliar, something you're learning, it stands to reason that children, people who are humans for the first time, have more stuff firing off and therefore learn better and easier. But if as we grow up, we continue putting ourselves in situations where our neurons are always firing, we're experiencing the same thing. Learning is in your control. You may not have known that, which is fine. But now I just told you. It's in your control. Do new stuff. do new stuff, try new things, do it often, do it regularly. It's valuable, and it'll allow you to learn. To people who think that they can't learn because they're older, because they've gotten older, it is untrue. Now you know. You could do with that what you please. But yes, so we are all just children who have been alive longer. So if anything, we should all be getting continuously better. Personal standpoint. Again, I haven't been alive for that long, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. But I'm sharing it and you're listening, so here we are. So all of this to circle back to the question of asking, what do you want to be when you grow up, to a child? And they're probably going to answer some occupation. Some of them may say they want to be parents or something, grandparents, which I think is an adorable answer personally. But the way of conversing and asking this question with children could potentially be set up like this. This is how I experienced it and wrote it down. So you ask the child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Let's say they say a doctor. You would say, oh, what do doctors do? And let's say they say, doctors heal people. Doctors make people feel better. Then you would say, oh, you want to help people feel better when you grow up. That's amazing. You see how that was shifted from what to a who? Who do you want to be when you grow up? Now, if you ask that to a child, especially a child who hasn't already been well versed or been versed at all in the concept of higher level thinking, they may be confused. They may not give you that kind of answer. And with children and people who are unfamiliar, you have to guide them because they don't know. If someone's not taught something, they probably don't know. That doesn't sound like that deep of a statement, but it really kind of is if you think about it. There's something that's really been shown to me lately, especially working with children. If you don't teach it, they don't know. If you don't help them remember it, they won't remember. The remembering is a skill. It's still one of the levels on the order of thinking, on the levels of thinking. It's still on there. You still gotta learn how to remember. Children do. Hopefully you don't, if you're watching this at this point in your life. For your own benefit. You learn how to remember. You learn how to understand. You learn how to apply. You learn how to analyze. You learn how to evaluate. And you learn how to create. You are told, you are guided, and you practice. That's how you learn. That's how you master something, I guess. That's how you master something. You can learn it, but that's how you master something. So, in this regard, when speaking to children who have not been here for that long, and may not have been raised by people who have been teaching them about higher order, higher level thinking, why do I keep saying order? Where's that word coming from? You guide them through the process. So, in another situation, you ask the child, what do you want to be when you grow up? They say, I want to be a firefighter. You're like, oh, what do firefighters do? Maybe they say, oh, firefighters put out fires. You say, oh, you want to help solve problems. That is so cool. Who is that? Who do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know about you, but I would consider rampant fires to be a pretty huge problem. And I'm very appreciative that firefighters have made it their mission to put them out. So I, my community, my society, my family, my belongings are not cooked. My body is not cooked. We're not in constant droughts because the firefighters are doing what they do. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Same for doctors, same for all the occupations. I appreciate you. You are valuable. And you're helping us all out. Thank you. So, That's their perspective. That's why you ask them, what does this thing do? Because let's say I asked another child and they say, oh, I want to be a firefighter. And then I'm like, oh, okay, what do firefighters do? And then they say, oh, they rescue people from fires. And you say, oh, you want to rescue people. You want to save people. You want to keep people safe. That's wonderful. That was the same occupation. But if they want to do if they're coming at it from a different perspective, if I said, oh, you want to solve problems, to the one who wanted to save people, or said that they want to rescue people, that child may not have even felt heard or understood. That conversation would have been a flop almost. And to ask someone, being asked a question and then the person acts like they understood you when they didn't, that feels like crap. And depending on the child, they're not going to speak up about it or correct you. And the way children perceive things is very different too. That could end up being a traumatic experience for them subconsciously when they're older, because trauma becomes trauma based on when you got it. Not trying to logic yourself out of it when you're older and can look back on it. Was that traumatic? Technically, no. But if that child was like, oh, they're asking me about it, that's wonderful, they really want to hear what I have to say, and then you just tell them essentially the answer and go on. You brought them up, but then you just left them there. To put it in another way, which is kind of extreme, but it's applicable. If you decided for some reason you wanted to go like bungee jumping or zip lining or something, and the people who were supposed to be up there with you left you there and walked away, you'd be scared out of your mind. But that's what adults will consider traumatic, because healthy adults will consider traumatic, because that's actual death. For children are fully dependent on the adults in their lives, essentially. So when you're disregarded by the one you are fully dependent on, or feel disregarded, that is traumatic. Traumatic state, it's a traumatic feeling, traumatic stance to be in. It's not good. Please be intentional about not doing it. It's very important. That affects people, potentially their entire lives. God forbid. So, yes, that's how you could reframe it, from what to who. Because if they, let's say the child who wanted to be a firefighter to put out fires. And from what I see, that's someone who wants to solve problems, because rampant fires are a big problem. If they decide they don't want to be a firefighter when they get older, okay, let me back up. The way I kind of see it at this point in my life, which could be wrong, and if it's wrong, I'm sure it'll come up and I'll probably end up sharing that change too, is that children are much more open to God, divine, supernatural stuff. They're more open to it. They're more receptive. They're more open-hearted, kind of in general. And I really think that's one of the things that shouldn't really change about people. And so, with that standpoint, I kind of believe that children know what they're gonna do. I think that children know who they are and who they're gonna be when they grow up. I think they know, but they know the who, not necessarily the what. The what requires experience. most children do not have a full conceptual understanding of what firefighters do, what it takes to be a firefighter. I heard the other day that firefight if there's like schedules where like maybe 3 or 4 days out of the week, whether you have a family or not, you live at the fire station. And that was shocking to me. I'm not a child, and I didn't know that. So most children, I assume, do not have a full understanding of what it takes to do these jobs. So it's not the what, but the who. The who does that. Who solves the problems. So again, if that child knew, they said they wanted to be a firefighter because they want to put out fires, I would see that as, oh, this is a person who wants to solve problems. That's who they are. And if a child knows that, if a child in their head has been told, oh, I see that you like to solve problems, if they decide they don't want to be a firefighter when they're older, they'll still have that, okay, I don't want to necessarily put out fires. Where else can I solve problems? And they're looking around with something, with raw material that they can use to create. And it's not, and they already have it, like, as a child. Because when you're older, even if you don't already have the raw material, you can get it. Like, it's there. It exists. It's raw material. It's real. You can see it. So it's just so much easier, and it's just so valuable for the child to have that already. Or even if that is wrong, maybe the person didn't use the right words. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe they didn't want to solve problems. Maybe they want to, maybe it was more to keep, maybe it was to prevent problems. Maybe it's more so, it's less stopping the fires that are happening and putting them out. Maybe it was more keeping fires from starting, and they didn't know how to say that at the time, or whatever. Even having the process modeled and reaching something similar, they have that model, and they can use that model. So yeah, that's how one could use it with children. If one wanted to use this with their own inner child, I guess it'd be kind of the same thing. So for me personally, I have thought about becoming quite a few different things in my life so far. Lawyer, fashion designer, dance instructor, those the ice skaters on Disney on Ice who travel, them, virtual assistant. I've thought of neuroscientist, biologist, researcher, medical researcher, all the things. And a lot of those things don't seem like they go together. Most of those things don't seem like they go together at all. But from this standpoint, from this perspective, I could sit down and with each of those ones that I have wanted to be, currently am interested in doing, I could ask myself, what do you want to be? What is the thing that you're interested in or have been interested in? And then I haven't done this yet, and I pick fashion designer. And then I'm like, okay, what does a fashion designer do? You cannot just say designs fashion. I mean, you could, but I feel like it wouldn't be as valuable. You wouldn't get as much out of it if you just regurgitate the occupation. It's like using the word that you're defining in the definition. I don't know what it means. That's not helpful. So what do fashion designers do? Fashion designers create wearable beauty. I could say that. Oh, okay. You want to add beauty to the world. You want to add sensual beauty to the world. Beauty you can sense with your 5 senses. That's a who. Someone who values and creates sensual beauty. And that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. That can be someone who, if I decide I don't want to be a fashion designer, I'm trying to think of something. That could be someone who creates really soft material for clothing and for bed sheets and for all the other stuff. That could be someone who creates really beautiful music. That could be someone who ends up painting. That could be someone who remodels homes. There are lots of different ways that someone's like the innermost parts of them could kind of take that and mold it and create the who, like become the who. And as an individual, I would have that. Creating beauty. Sensual beauty. I see. That's wonderful. And then maybe go into another one. And especially if you go through a bunch of them and you figure out the common themes, the common threads, what's all coming together, what seems to be a pattern, and then you take those, like maybe that one, maybe those few, and you're like, okay, this is who I want to be. I'm going to decide to be with these. Maybe one, maybe more of them, I don't know, your personal capacity. And you decide that you're going to, like, this is how you're going to model your life. Maybe not like from here on all the way out, but from here on out, just going forward, you have something. You have your raw materials. And maybe you decide you're going to start working from the bottom up in your what's with this aspect of your who. Top down, bottom up, coming together. Then I think that could be incredibly valuable. And I'm going to make sure that I'm doing this myself too. So that's what I wanted to share. Bye.